Hello, I am Peter Okwacha. Welcome to Focus on Africa. Votes continue to be counted in the South African elections. The ANC is on track to win, but with 48 parties on the ballot, just how much has their support been eroded?
And I'm Nomsa Masego live from South Africa, where the credibility of the elections has been brought into question by smaller political parties. We discuss why.
The Electoral Commission will urgently conduct an audit of results and votes cast in a sample of voting stations to ascertain if double voting occurred.
And I'm Milton Nkosi live from the Results Center here in Pretoria. We'll give you the latest.
Also on the program, we head over to one of the world's most celebrated international arts events, the Venice Biennale. We'll find out why South African artist Mawande Kazanzile chooses to highlight his art with a rather unusual material, cow dung.
Seeing the dung as a pigment, that deserve also a status of high value, of high art.
And in sports, many Kenyan football fans will be keeping a close eye on the European Champions League final. Find out why. Thanks for joining us here on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. Counting is underway in South Africa's general elections, with officials saying 90% of the votes will be tallied by 10 p.m. tonight. As it stands, the ruling ANC is in the lead, well ahead of the main opposition party, the Democratic Alliance, with 55% of the vote. But concerns are being raised over the legitimacy of the poll. Let's go to Nomsa Maseko, who is live in Johannesburg now. Nomsa.
Well, Peter, in just the last few hours, smaller opposition parties held an impromptu press conference at the Election Results Center in Pretoria, and they were questioning the eligibility of the results and, of course, the credibility thereof. And this comes after 20 people have been arrested for alleged electoral fraud because they say that they were able to remove the ink on their thumb and went to vote again. But we also heard from the Elections Results Center, where the Independent Electoral Commission held a press briefing in which they announced that they will be running an audit which could result in the delaying of the announcement of the results, which is expected on Saturday.
The Electoral Commission will urgently conduct an audit of results and votes cast in a sample of voting stations to ascertain if double voting occurred. The audit will cover a statistically representative sample of voting stations, as well as where complaints and allegations of double voting have been received.
Now joining us live from the Election Results Center in Tshwane, Pretoria, is the BBC's Milton Nkosi. Milton, what's the latest from where you are?
Yes, Nomsa, the votes are coming in here. They've already counted just over 60% of the vote. I don't know if you can see the leaderboard just behind me over my shoulder there. The ANC is leading by about 57% as things stand. The votes are trickling in, and some small parties are having gains, and the big ones are in trouble, like the DA. They're shedding votes, although they're still the second largest party in South Africa. I'm now joined by Professor Richard Culland from the University of Cape Town. Richard, what do you read into the results, at least from where we are now at 60% of the count?
Well, it looks like the forecasts are coalescing around a 57–58% mark for the ANC. Given the rot and the corruption of the Zuma years, this has to be a big victory for the ANC. Yes, it's the first time they will have fallen beneath 60%, and I just exchanged words with Gwede Mantashe, the chairman of the ANC, and he said our ego needs 60%, Richard. But the truth is, given what's happened, given the decade of corruption that Zuma led, Ramaphosa's reform project has landed. He has turned the corner for the ANC. Anything above 56 is a good result for them.
So this is good for the ANC, but more importantly, good for Cyril Ramaphosa. But things are not so smooth back at home at the ANC headquarters.
Well, that's right. And the big issue here was, would Ramaphosa get the result he needs to create more political space within his divided house, the ANC? They've been a drag factor in the last years. He's tried to implement and execute a tough program of structural reform, but also institutional rebuilding. He's laid a platform. What he needs tonight is a result that will turn that platform into a springboard for more decisive action that will convince investors to return back to South Africa.
And what are the leaders for you in the smaller parties, just briefly?
Well, I think this was also a referendum on populism and whether South Africa had an appetite for the global phenomenon we've seen of the rise of nationalist politics. And Malema will probably claim a result that is beneficial to his EFF, but they'll still be around 10%. And they won't be a kingmaker in Gauteng, it seems. So overall, a good night for the ANC and a disappointing night for the opposition.
Thank you very much, Professor Richard Calland. Well, you had there for yourself, Nomsa and Peter. That is exactly where South Africa is tonight. The ANC is leading. It's the king of the town, but a weak king at that. Back to you.
Milton, thank you very much for that. That was Milton Nkosi joining us from the Election Results Centre. Now, joining me here in Johannesburg is economist Thabi Leoka. Now, Thabi, with the allegations of vote rigging having been announced by the smaller opposition parties, how bad is that for the economy? And is this bad also for Brand SA?
So what the IEC, the Independent Electoral Commission, has said is that there are many checks and balances. So they can actually look against your ID number to see how many people have voted and how many times they've voted, and that's why they've been able to actually get those who voted multiple times. I think that the IEC is a credible institution. It's done really well and it's reputable both on the continent and internationally. But these glitches will happen, unfortunately. But I'm hoping that they get to the bottom of this. Will it impact on the economy? Not directly, because what will impact the economy is the outcome of the elections and also what the winner will do to the economy in terms of reforms. If it's Cyril Ramaphosa, he came up with many reforms before the elections, such as land reform. He talked about tourism reform, telecommunication reform, spectrum that we need, and that's what South Africans need, and that's what South Africans, I hope, voted for.
Now, investors are obviously watching this election very closely, and it does seem like the ANC's Cyril Ramaphosa will become the country's president. But he has a lot to deal with, doesn't he? In particular, number one on his list, sorting out the economy and also the 27% unemployment rate.
I would definitely not want to be in his position. He has too many balls to juggle. He has to be ruthless. He has to be committed to the reforms that he promised. South Africans, unlike the previous elections, South Africans have run out of patience and they want to see change now. And unfortunately for Cyril Ramaphosa, the pressure and the heat is on. So he has to put through reforms that will see growth, and we have seen subdued, mediocre growth over the years. There's very high unemployment, the highest numbers in the past 2 years than we've seen in the history of South Africa's, the record of unemployment, at 27%, and if you look at discouraged workers, it's above 35%. We've seen also for the first time that the youth that have actually graduated with degrees such as in engineering cannot find jobs. They want jobs. You also have the pressure of the youth who want free education, and they say that the ANC of old promised them free education and they're demanding it. It's their right. There also is land reform, which is a very difficult one to tackle. There's also all these commissions, so he has to deal with politics internally and how he'll get rid of the very unsavory people that belong to the ANC.
So it's a lot to deal with then for President Cyril Ramaphosa. That was Thabi Leoka, economist, joining us here in Johannesburg. It's back to you, Peter.
Many thanks, Nomsama Seko, live there from Johannesburg. And viewers, remember you can follow all the latest on the South African election on our website. That's at bbc.com/news. Let's take a quick look now at other stories making the headlines across Africa. A British man with links to Al-Shabaab group has been sentenced to 4 years in prison in Kenya after being found guilty of possessing bomb-making materials. Jermaine Grant is already serving a 9-year sentence for forging immigration documents. He's believed to be part of a terror cell that planned multiple attacks over Christmas in 2011. Nigeria's largest emirate, Kano, will be divided into 5 parts in what's being described as a move to weaken the current emir. Mohammed Sanusi II has been critical of the government. The emir, one of the most influential traditional leaders in the country, will now be left with just a fifth of his territory. A Zimbabwean academic has been named one of the 10 most inspiring women in the world. US-based Tererai Trent is being recognized for her role in promoting equality and female empowerment. A life-sized statue of her is expected to be unveiled in New York in August. This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News with me, Peter Okwoche. Still to come, surviving on just $26 a month, we explore why Ethiopia's factory workers are the lowest paid in the world. I'm Peter Okwoche. The top story this hour. Votes are being counted in South Africa's general election. The ANC remains in the lead, but they've lost popularity to opposition parties due to corruption and high unemployment in the country. Ethiopia's garment factory workers are the lowest paid in the world, surviving on just $26 a month. That's despite the fact that they make clothes for some of the world's biggest fashion brands like H&M. Our Africa business reporter Anne-Marie Diaz-Borges brings us this report.
High fashion, high prices, but low wages. It's been reported that the Ethiopian factory workers making clothes for well-known Western fashion brands like H&M, Guess, Calvin Klein and Tommy Hilfiger are among the lowest paid in the world. Researchers found that some garment workers in Ethiopia were taking home just $26 a month. Even notoriously poorly paid workers in Bangladesh earn double that. In neighboring Kenya, garment workers earn $200 a month. So why is the Ethiopian workforce paid so poorly? The report says the Ethiopian government's eagerness to attract foreign investors led it to promote the lowest base wage rate of any garment producing country in the world. And while the bid has succeeded in attracting fashion giants, the workforce is not a happy one. The report showed that factories replaced all their workers every 12 months on average. In a statement to the BBC, H&M, which works with 9 suppliers in Ethiopia, said, "We believe that our presence in Ethiopia has a positive impact, contributing to much needed economic growth in the country. Since we began sourcing from Ethiopia in 2013, around 18,000 jobs have been created." The Stern Center at NYU, who published the report, has urged the Ethiopian government to establish a minimum wage and to make a long-term economic plan to strengthen the apparel industry.
Well, we've contacted all the other companies mentioned in that report and are waiting responses. But let's speak now to Paul Barrett. He's one of the authors of the report and joins me now from New York. Paul, your report seems to suggest that the Ethiopian government is complicit in this payment of low wages. Could you explain how?
Sure. I'm not sure I would use the word complicit, but certainly it is partially responsible for the situation. The Ethiopian government reasonably has seen the apparel industry as a good one to boost manufacturing in Ethiopia. It's an industry that you don't need to spend a huge amount of money to get the factories going, and it employs a lot of low-skilled workers who can go to work right away. But as part of the package, the Ethiopian government promoted a very low base wage, and the foreign manufacturers that answered this call factored that wage into their business plans, and as a result, you have the situation that your setup piece described, with very low entry-level base wages.
So I guess the argument from the government would be that if it doesn't give out favorable rate, then it won't get investors.
Well, certainly that would be a fear, that if they raise the pay level too extremely, that the investors might go away. However, there is ample middle ground here. The government of Ethiopia right now is considering a minimum wage that would raise the floor beneath some of these garment workers. That would be for the first time a minimum wage in the private sector. And some of the companies we talked to said that they would find a minimum wage acceptable because it would add a certain degree of stability to the situation. So there's plenty of room for compromise.
Are you surprised that the wages are so low despite the outrage in the practices of fashion chains in Southeast Asia a few years ago?
The low wages were surprising. More surprising was, I assumed that the cost of living in Ethiopia was relatively low and that lower wages might be sufficient, but we found that workers are not able to live a decent life on this base wage. And while some of them get increments, little bonuses for productivity, clearly the minimum wage needs to come up.
Okay, Paul Barrett there. Thank you very much. He's the author of one of the authors of that report. Thanks for your time.
You're welcome.
You're watching BBC Focus on Africa. It's now time for some sports. Mimi, more football tonight.
More football indeed. Now, Kenyan football fans will be taking special notice of next month's European Champions League final. Spurs' Victor Wanyama had to limp off injured as they won 3-2 against Ajax in Amsterdam, while the night before, son of former Kenya international Mike Okoth Origi, Divock, who plays for Belgium, helped Liverpool win with 2 goals. Wanyama is looking to follow in the footsteps of his brother McDonald Mariga, who won the Champions League medal with Inter Milan in 2010, but was an unused substitute. Wanyama could go one step further and play in the final. People in Nairobi are thrilled that their country will be well represented.
Yeah, I feel very proud of it. It's really inspirational for upcoming players and youngsters coming up. Because it's our dream. It's a dream come true to our players.
It can also open doors to scoutings in Kenya for the talents in football, because most Kenyans are known for only running, but nowadays things are changing. We are now known for running for the cup, and that is Champions League. So whoever wins, it's Kenya win.
Love that. Whoever wins is Kenya wins. Now, Spurs' North London rivals will be hoping to make their own European final, which could be an all-English one also, with both Chelsea and Arsenal in the second leg action shortly. Chelsea hosts Eintracht Frankfurt at Stamford Bridge. They are level at 1-1 from the first leg. The West London side have already qualified for next season's Champions League thanks to a guaranteed top 4 finish in the Premier League. Meanwhile, Arsenal and their African stars, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, Alex Iwobi and Mohamed El Neni traveled to Spain to face Valencia. The Gunners are 3-1 up after the opening game in North London. Their manager, Unai Emery, may be returning to his former club, but he's full of motivation to win.
We finished in the Premier League, not possibility, but we are in this competition with a possibility tomorrow. And with a big ambition, with a strong mentality, with a full motivation, and I want to enjoy tomorrow. I want to play tomorrow. Matches like that, in this moment, semi-final, difficult team, away for one important target after that, I think is all positive for us.
In the NBA, Milwaukee Bucks beat the Boston Celtics in Game 5 of the semifinal to secure a 4-1 series win and their first Eastern Conference final appearance since 2001. Forward Giannis Antetokounmpo, who many Nigerian basketball fans follow with interest due to his links with the country, had an impressive performance with 20 points, 8 rebounds and 8 assists, helping to secure a 116-91 victory for the Bucks. They will next face the winner of the Philadelphia 76ers and Toronto Raptors series, with a trip to the NBA Finals on the line.
The energy in the arena tonight was unbelievable, was crazy. And it feels good. You know, we're happy that we were able to clinch here in Milwaukee. We're happy that we are going to the third round, and we're happy that the people are into it. I don't think I've ever seen people of Milwaukee being so excited about basketball, about the team. So I love that. At the end of the day, we're playing for ourselves and for the team, but having the whole city supporting us it's amazing.
And that's all the sport. Peter.
In tonight's match with Arsenal, I don't want any excitement, no goals, no penalties, no goal-mouth struggles, just a very boring game.
We've had so much excitement in the past 2 days, haven't we, Peter?
Absolutely. Many thanks, Mimi. Now, my next story literally stinks. The art world is gathering at the Venice Biennale Festival, and this year, 8 African countries are being represented. Amongst them is South Africa's Mawande Kazanzile. His art, which often tackles political and social issues like racism and colonialism, has a special touch to it: the use of cow dung. The BBC's Victoria Owahonda went to meet him.
I was born and I grew up in a village in the eastern province of South Africa called Lady Frey. And it's more rural, so it's not urbanized. And so there was a tradition of using cow dung as a building material. So it was an aesthetic that I grew up seeing. In art, it began as a rebellion against the notions of painting. The Western notions of painting, of using oil on canvas. So hence I wanted to create a different conversation. Seeing the dung as a pigment, that deserve also a status of high value, of high art. The cow dung is a dictator, and it's so beautiful because it's so dominant. I buy pigments and then I mix with them. So the cow dung has its own natural color, so it absorbs other colors. So whatever results that I'm going to get, it's not predictable.
25 years since apartheid ended, since Nelson Mandela was elected as the first black president. Where is South Africa and her people today?
I think one thing I can say is that we should not postpone our freedom. We did have a political one, but there are still things that need to be worked with. So I think until we reach a stage where we say we can no longer postpone this struggle, which is financial, economically, which is spiritually, which is intellectually, and then I think we'll be in a good space. I don't think we'll even need politics.
You personally, as an artist, what do you want people to take away from your work?
They don't have to rationalize everything, if they want to, if that's how they are wired, it's okay. Or for me, it's like, attending a concert, and I can't even hear the sound, the language she's speaking in, but I enjoy the melody, So for me, that's my expectation, that's my wish, for my audience, to kind of, have that connection with the work rather than trying to analyze it, So that's the burden of Western philosophy. But I think beyond that, there's freedom, So that's my expectation.
Quite a few African artists that I know that like to use cow dung in their art. Just before we go now, another look at our top story. Votes are being counted in South Africa's election, with 90% expected to be tallied tonight. President Cyril Ramaphosa is hoping to prevent a slide in support for the governing African National Congress. That's it on Focus on Africa for tonight. For me, Peter Opoche, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching. See you soon.